we've gone through a series of different types of planning activities. I think we have a rich history of sustainability planning or environmental stewardship planning, and now have, I would say, three or four plans that primarily focused either on preservation of green space or on greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. And so our most recent report on mitigation was actually completed in 2021. And we were doing that to jumpstart our commitment of work associated with the Global Covenant of Mayors. And so if you're familiar with that effort, there are two tracks within that. One is a mitigation track, a climate mitigation track, and then the other is an adaptation track. And so we had most recently completed our climate action plan in 2021. Again, the primary focus of that was greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. And so we recognized after, kind of developing strategy about how we might implement greenhouse gas emissions mitigation strategy, recognized that we needed to then come back and follow up and focus more on adaptation. So that was one driver. I think probably the more practical and maybe universal driver was, again, an acknowledgement that we're continuing to see an increased frequency and severity of environmental hazards and climate events here locally. We took a very multi-departmental and sort of multi-stakeholder approach to building that plan. And so we brought together actually 13 different metro departments during a series of 3 workshops to create that plan. And we spent one entire day as part of those workshop series doing something that's probably easiest described as kind of impact mapping. And so what we ended up doing was trying to better engage and move through kind of a series of root cause analysis type conversations. What happens to a disadvantaged community member in a hypothetical situation when a natural hazard presents itself? So if flooding occurs, what happens after that? Well, it could mean that it's displacing somebody. And when we're displacing somebody, that might place additional stressors on their financial situation. It could also cause a whole series of other social circumstances that could further complicate things. And so I think we went to great lengths to try to understand how an extreme weather event or a climate hazard would be essentially a complicating factor in terms of making anyone who's in a disadvantaged community really feel increasing intensity about their circumstance. It is a challenge, and I, again, would not say that we have fully figured it out. I will tell you what has resonated best, I think most significantly, at least on a social services side of things, because I feel like I would put kind of partners and addressing silos maybe in 2 buckets. One is sort of that core infrastructure, and I think core infrastructure providers actually get it at this point because they're seeing very directly the impact on their operation of services, or they're seeing massive damage happen, and then having to realize how they're having to rebuild and how it's impacting their budgets, right? Their budgets and sort of their planned strategic work has to be put on hold when they're going back and having to rebuild and replace infrastructure. So I think they get it. Where I think it has been harder to maybe see headway is more on sort of the social side of things, where if you talk about concepts of climate adaptation, sometimes there is reluctance to recognize and layer in kind of an additional lens because there is such intense focus on something like addressing homelessness or addressing public health issues or addressing affordable housing or community safety. What I have found has been really, really helpful recently is talking about the concept of climate change and adverse weather conditions as a risk multiplier. And that seems to resonate with people, to be able to say, everyone's acknowledging that the issue you're trying to address, whether that's food deserts and food insecurity, or if it is affordable housing, or if it is, energy burden, or if it is, public health. Everyone acknowledges that you have intense problems there and you are doing everything you can to address it. I'm going to tell you about something that's going to make your job even more challenging. And so I'm not asking you to shift your focus from what you're working on. Let's just make sure we're considering this additional complicating factor that is happening. And I think it's been really helpful to talk about it that way, to say the reason why we're focusing on this and the reason why I'm asking just for a portion of your time is because this is going to make everything you're trying to do so much harder if we don't start changing what we're doing to help address it. And that seems to resonate a little bit more. I also think there are two ways and two angles with which you can come from this work, and we're kind of tag teaming and doing both of these in different circumstances. One is figuring out how to get climate a seat at the table as part of some of your most important core processes. And so when I talk about that, I mean, with your planning departments, perhaps with your finance teams, and then also sort of trying to embed that into perhaps strategic planning processes as well. So I think we quickly realized there, as I shared with you, there are departments that own and administer processes, and then there are departments that are out doing a lot of work, and both of those need to be part of the conversation. But I would start working with whichever one of those you see more traction. There's so much runway in this space, and I think having a couple of partners or peers on board who are already bought into the concept is really important.